Mamdani's kid. Mamdani is the lecturer at university. Is contesting for mayor of New York, right? So I'm talking about this because they're Ugandans, right? The mountain will move if you actually believe you can move it. But the way you show yourself that, the way you express the faith, the way you show yourself that you actually have the faith to move the mountain is by putting in the required work to move that mountain. We believe that only humans tell stories, yeah? And our goal here is to clean up the stories that are being told in society, right? We believe that a society can be successful if the society tells the right stories. A business like a person, a person needs food to stay alive, right? But also he needs the story to yes, exactly, to have a reason to stay alive, right? So you have to stay alive, but you don't need just the means to stay alive like the food, you also need a reason to stay alive, right? This is what Jesus is trying to say when he says man shall not live on bread alone, but also the word of God. The movie is exaggerated for dramatic effect, and that is just the nature of storytelling. When you're sharing your story with the world, you have to exaggerate. Welcome back to the Uvotam podcast. In this episode, we are going to talk about understanding your business. But first, I want to take you through the journey of the Ugandan entrepreneur. On the internet, or if you read data from elsewhere, you'll find out that Uganda is one of the most entrepreneurial countries. And what most people mean by this is many people in Uganda opting to do a proprietorship instead of getting employed in someone else's business. Yeah, but that is half of the story. What most people don't also tell you is that the majority of businesses in Uganda are very small scale businesses. Mostly you'd hear about a mobile money stall, you'd hear about agent banking stall, you'll hear about a fast food stall. These are what they call hand to mouth activities, where if you skip a day without working, you're probably going to skip that same day without dinner. What we are going to talk about today is how do you move your business out of the hand-to-mouth activities? Basically, how you as an entrepreneur, maybe someone who's employed somewhere right now, someone whose social media is moving on right now. You're getting the numbers, you're getting the views, and you want to turn this idea into a business. Someone who already has your business, you may be someone who's already supplying, maybe the government. They say the majority of successful businesses in Uganda are tenderpreneurs. If you're a tenderpreneur and you want to reduce your reliance on the tenders, or someone who even has a successful business, you could be a big brand like MTN and you want to understand how best to tell the story of your business so you can target another customer niche. Also, you can outcompete your other competitors within the same industry. This is the kind of podcast where we are going to dig slightly deeper into how one would understand their own business. Let's start with an example of the typical Ugandan entrepreneur. Say you sell the acre of land that your father left in Masaka. You make a quick maybe 30 million. What you choose to do is come and rent a nice looking room at one of the malls in Kisasi, where you start your own agent banking and mobile money stall. Yeah, so this is a quite reliable business. You're employing yourself, and the returns are easy to calculate. Maybe you hire 2 or 3 people to help you manage the stall alongside yourself, and you're very disciplined. You keep your books well. In the end, every day you make the commission of your sales to take care of your family, or to pursue your dreams, whatever those may be. Typically it's true that is a business, but if you're looking at the essence of entrepreneurship, that is less of a business and more of employment by other means. So if your job is basically to help Stambik achieve their entrepreneurial dreams, to help MTN achieve their entrepreneurial dreams, but these big companies are not even willing to pay you because, payment comes with benefits and NSSF and all that stuff, they instead create this sort of niche so-called entrepreneurial thing, which is a commission-based business, where you go and sell an MTN product, where you go and sell a Stambik product, and claim to be an entrepreneur. You're not actually an entrepreneur. you are an employee of MTN, except you don't have the benefits that come with employment. Entrepreneurship, at its essence, is art. It's like painting a picture, it's like writing a beautiful story, it's like taking a nice photograph. That is what entrepreneurship is. What takes a good entrepreneur among everything else is arrogance. And this could be, you could call this other terms. Most people call it purpose, most people call it compassion. I think the Freudian term is Messiah complex. What takes one to be an entrepreneur is that arrogance, that belief in yourself that you, among all the 8 billion people in the world, have what it takes to change the world significantly, because you see a certain problem that needs to be changed, because there is a little bit of discomfort that you think the world should accommodate, rather should resolve so it can accommodate you. Or it could even be that you just want to increase the joy in the world. You want the world to be a happier place. You want the world to be more fun. That is the kind of arrogance that it takes to be an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is not just the person who is looking to make money to feed their family. That is employment. That is the safest route. Usually you go to school, pick up a skill, get employed, feed your family. That is the story your father tells you. It's the safest route to take in life. But an entrepreneur, on the other hand, is the risk taker. The person who sees that path and doesn't try to dodge around. Maybe instead of getting a job at MTN, they start an agent's shop. Or instead of, like the normal typical businesses in Uganda, it could even be a border business. If your job is easily replicated, if there is no innovation required in your job, you're employed, even if you don't know who your employer is. If you're riding a border among the 100 borders, and you don't add any value, you're doing the same thing as those other 1,000 borders in your area doing. If you're selling Rolex among 100,000 Rolex people and you don't add any value, you're not an entrepreneur by the definition of who this episode is targeting. You are basically employed. You just can't point a finger to who your actual employer is, or you have multiple employers. Maybe let's call it that way. In this episode, we want to take you through what it means to actually step out of employment, if that is actually your dream. If you're arrogant enough to take that risk, we want to take you through what it means to step out of employment, start taking on the journey as an entrepreneur, what that means, and yes, what kind of skill set, what kind of nature of storytelling you need. We're going to tell you about Uvotam and what our journey in entrepreneurship means. And yes, we hope that, this expands your mind beyond what most people, including maybe yourself, think about employment. And if you're already running a big business, we hope that what this helps you identify is how do you actually establish the story of your business? How do you make sure we understand what you're trying to do with your business as an entrepreneur, as well as you understand it? And with me today is my co-host, Kathy. Yes, Kathy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kenneth, for the introduction of this episode of Understanding Your Business. I'm going to go with the first question. Where should someone start when creating a business?
Where do you start as an entrepreneur, right? The first thing, as I already mentioned, is arrogance. Yeah. So you need to have that arrogance. You need to have that character in you to know that there's this problem in the world and I have what it takes to solve it. So, someone else doesn't experience the same problem. So maybe the generation in the future don't experience that problem. Or, so I don't have to go through that same problem again, right? And this could be as simple as I don't like to walk, right? I don't like to walk from my home to, say, go and play football. And this is a problem. I'm sure other people don't like to walk either. And I'm going to solve it by starting a border business, right? To make sure that people don't walk, to solve it for some amount of people and myself, right? That could be the same thing. And again, this is in contrast to what I've already said is if you start your border business as a job, basically a border job, where you're buying a board as a safe way to give money to provide for your family or to provide for yourself and so on, or to live comfortably. That is different from the entrepreneur who does the exact same thing, but with the mindset of solving this problem for another person, right? And this will make sense as we go forward, but it is very important. The arrogance is important because entrepreneurship is made of arrogance. You could call it arrogance, you could call it purpose, you could call it Freud, the known European psychologist, called it a Messiah complex. You sort of feel that it is up to you to change the world into a world you want to live in, right? That is the first step. That is what it takes to be an entrepreneur. The second is you have to believe in something. You have to have a story that guides you. So you have to think of a belief system as that story that points you to what to do next, right? As an entrepreneur, there's some known stories, right? So some of them are, for example, the most common one is Christianity. At least in Kampala, the most common story is Christianity, right? So we have this guy who got sent down to forgive the people and save the world and make the community more harmonious, right? And his ideology is basically love and forgiveness, yeah. And you could be that could be the story that drives you. You could look at the world today and say, oh, there are so many bad things that are happening. My entrepreneurial journey is going to be about bringing more forgiveness and more love. Yeah. And this could mean anything. You could start a church. People make money in churches. You could start a Bible school and maybe teach kids so you can prepare the next generation, and maybe start your school that teaches kids biblical work. You could start selling Bibles, maybe, there's some business that, whatever it is, whichever way you feel like you can do that. So there are other stories, right? So there's, again, there's a lot of stories. There's communism, for example, where, we should all be equal, each should get according to their need, and they should put effort they should give according to their effort, and so forth, and so on and so forth. It doesn't matter what the story is. As an entrepreneur, you need to actually have a story you believe in, right? A story you believe in. It could be that the world should be beautiful, right? That is a story as well. And your goal maybe is to take pictures of beautiful things and post them on social media with the aim that or post them in galleries with the aim that people come and pay you to look at the beauty that the world has, right? That could be your story. Like, the story itself doesn't matter. You just have to know that this is the story that's guiding me. This is what I believe in, and this is my compass. Yeah. And what the way that helps is when you're lost, you always go back to your story and know, am I bringing more beauty in the world, if that is the story you want to tell, and so on and so forth, right? Then the third thing is you have to know what you're good at. Yeah. The reality is, again, my father used to say this a lot whenever he wanted to start his lectures, that look at this hand. Not all fingers are the same, right? Yeah, yes. And we are not all the same. It's the same thing as the hand. Every finger is its own size. We are all good at different things, right? So a big part of the entrepreneur is knowing what they're good at. And a lot of the education system tries to box you into the labels. Yeah. So you could label yourself an engineer. I label myself a podcaster. I label myself a farmer, and so on and so forth. And that could distract you from figuring out what you're good at. You could have the skill to say, take care of a farm, but you also have the skill to mitigate conflicts in your family, for example, and you have the skill of taking care of farm, you have the skill of mitigating your family, you have, say, a good voice that sings in church. A collection of these things is what makes what you're good, or what you're good about, what you're good at, right? A collection of these things. It doesn't have to be one thing. And as an entrepreneur, your role is to, first of all, know what that is, right? And this is not one thing. Again, it's not, again, the narrative, for example, if you look at, say, Silicon Valley, is if you're very good at coding, you'll be successful in Silicon Valley. If you're very good at then leadership, I don't know what that is in Silicon Valley, for example, but if you have like a leader's mindset, you can lead a big company, and so on and so forth, right? But most of those things assume that you can be good at one thing, which is very, very few people in the universe are that singular minded, if they're there at all, yeah. A lot of most people who become successful there means compromising a lot on what their life should have been. And most of those people don't end up becoming entrepreneurs. They become employees, because usually if you're employed, I'm hiring you for one skill set. If I'm hiring you as a farmer on my farm, I want you to be perfect at that part of farming that I've hired you to do, right? If I'm hiring you as a programmer, I want you to be good at just writing the code and making sure that the code works, right? But as an entrepreneur, you have to be yourself. and you have to find, this is what I'm good at. It's a collection of these things. This is a story that I want to guide me. This is a story I believe in. Basically, this is a story that I think will make my life more meaningful. And I'm arrogant enough to believe that with my skill set, I can make that story more of a reality, at least for myself, for the people around me, or for the next generation, right? So these are the core things that make an entrepreneur, right? So if you have the arrogance, you have a good story, hopefully it's a good story, it's not communism or one of those Western stories. If it's a good story, say for example, one of the stories, I personally, one of the stories that drive me is family, right? And this is a story that is also shared by, I think, a lot of Indian communities, right? That family comes first. When you're working, basically, it's a mix of it's basically communism, but constrained to the family, right? That as a family, you work for yourselves, and it is the family as a single unit against the world, right? So this is one of the stories that drives me, right? And so when I'm applying this story to, to my arrogance and what I know to be my skill set, this is the priorities. Okay, so how do you move as a family instead of as an individual, right? Yes, how do you move as a family, and what complies a family, right? Because also that less to be defined, who do I allow into my family, who do I push out of my family, and things like that. That is sort of the core belief. For most people, at least the people that I interact with in Uganda, it is a Jesus story, right? If you talk to them about, if you imagine, if you gave them all the money they wanted, for example, if you gave them everything they wanted, what would they do? They would go to church and thank God. Yeah, so this is to most people that I know, and that's a good story as well. It's not so bad. It's not the best story in my opinion, but it's not so bad, right? You could, and again, it doesn't matter how bad or good the story is. If you have the arrogance to believe, if you believe in it fully, and you have the arrogance to execute it, that is enough. That is what it takes to be an entrepreneur, basically, right? Yes, the world cannot be, it can't be made of one story. The world is made of multiple stories. And just picking a story, believing in a story depends on where you're from and how you've grown up and, the history of your lineage and so on and so forth. So that is not entirely up to you. But as long as you find out what that story is, find out what you're good at, yeah, and then figure out, and then have the arrogance to believe that you can make that story a reality by executing what you're good at, improving on what you're good at forever and ever. That is what it takes to be an
An
entrepreneur.
entrepreneur.
Yes.
Okay, so is arrogance the same as mindset? Do you think they fit in the same box?
So I think arrogance is a specific kind of mindset, right? It's so there's again, I'm using church as a big example because church is a very significant story in Uganda, right? Uh, in a big part of the fundamentalist church is the success mindset. Is that you pray? Most of it is used to con people, where give the pastor and then God will give you whatever. Yeah, but the core of that actual story is, if you have faith enough to believe that you're going to do something, the way you express that faith is by doing the required actions, right? To do that thing. So this is the same thing Jesus, I think, said in the Bible. So Jesus says, if you have enough faith, you can move mountains. But I don't think Jesus says, if you have faith, you're going to do that Star Wars thing of saying the mountain move here, right? No, that's not what he's saying. What he's saying is, the way you express that faith, the way you show yourself that you have that faith, is by putting in the work to move the mountain, right? The mountain will move if you actually believe you can move it. But the way you show yourself that, the way you express the faith, the way you show yourself that you actually have the faith to move the mountain, is by putting in the required work to move that mountain, right? So this is very similar to arrogance, right? The Christians call it faith. I call it arrogance. You have to, first of all, be in a position where that is a mindset, right? A mindset where you believe, first of all, that yes, for sure, this is where the world is. This is where I want the world. This is where the mountain is. This is where I want the mountain. And I have what it takes to move that mountain. Yes, and this belief or this faith or this arrogance can only be expressed through action. It's not movies, Star Wars, where you do magic and things like that. Yes, it is only expressed through action. It's where it could be, again, it could be as simple as, say, for example, look at Uvotam, right? Our goal is we believe that only humans tell stories, yeah? And our goal here is to clean up the stories that are being told in society, right? We believe that a society can be successful if the society tells the right stories, right? For example, there is a skit I saw on TikTok, yeah? And I don't know if we'll be able to cut it in the edit, but this guy this is a black immigrant, I think in Europe. So he goes to rob in a car. He enters a car. He goes to rob. Yeah. But these guys they were, I think, going for like a Halloween festival or something. So one of them was in that devil mask thing. Yes. So when this guy, I think, is like from West Africa, when he enters, then he sees this thing, he gets shocked. He thinks God is punishing him for something. Yes. So the guy who's driving the car locks it, and the guy has to face this thing. Yeah. So in his mind, he thinks it's a demon. Right? In his mind, he thinks a demon, even starts rebuking it. Jesus, I curse you, I curse you. Then he apologizes after when the cursing doesn't work. He apologizes to the guy. He says, please let me out, please let me out. And the thing is just scaring him. Yeah. The driver is smiling. He's waiting for the guy to realize that this is a mascot. Yes, but the video ends before the guy is untraumatized. The guy is still in that much trauma. But this guy is suffering from a bad story. Yeah, what he's suffering from is a story that they are demons and they can sit in cars and they can haunt you, right? Yes, yes, yes. So he holds this belief, and part of what we want to do at Uvotam is try to sanitize those stories. Yeah, we want to use some of the at least known methods, things like rationality, things like logic, some of the better stories that we've also experienced, some of the known structures of storytelling that we've learned that they teach in school and so on and so forth, to kind of sanitize some of the stories in Uganda, so people at least have their minds free from, if you entered the taxi, if you wanted to do your hustle of stealing taxis, you won't let a mascot scare you. This is what we do to birds. Birds also can't rob from a farm if you put a scarecrow, because birds have the story that anything that has eyes is a human watching me, right? So the point is, again, when you have the right stories in you, you're freer to sort of live. You're freer to live and express yourself. And I'm not saying people should steal, but this is just one extreme side of that story. Another side would be you never apply for jobs, for example, because you have the story that a certain kind of people who look a certain way are the only ones who get jobs. Yes, you never start a business because you have the mindset that only shares who have government connections can start businesses. It could be whatever story it is. Yes, yes. And at Uvotam, what we want to do is sanitize those. Yeah. And the entrepreneur, myself, all of us who start a business, we agree that we're arrogant enough to actually sanitize the story landscape in the country, right? And the way we are going to do that is tell better stories, is show people show people the bad parts of the bad stories and so on and so forth. And we believe that we are going to move that mountain. But the only way we are going to be able to move it, the only way we're going to show ourselves that we can actually move it, is through our actions, right? Yes. And that is the entrepreneur's journey. That is all it takes to be an entrepreneur.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So, okay, now that you're arrogant enough, you've been able to recognize your arrogance. You're arrogant enough, you know the story you want to tell, and you believe you have a good idea out there. So, what comes next?
Yeah. So this is again, it's going to be a little bit contradictory to what I said. But the first step after now, you sort of have a sense that you know the story you believe in, you know what you really believe in as a person. You feel the arrogance,
You have like a
yes,
heroic
yeah,
mindset.
yes, you feel the arrogance. It doesn't have to be like magnanimous as a heroic instinct. It has to be that you're irritated by something you see is wrong. That is arrogance. You go on, you're driving, say, to work, and the border cuts you and it pisses you off. You're arrogant enough to not be
Like,
okay
I
with the
want this
world that
to
has.
change.
Yes. So you have the arrogance, and this arrogance expresses itself in that way. The way you know that you have the arrogance is when you're pissed off about things in the world. That is not something to complain about. Now we have social media, so most people resort to complaining. But entrepreneurs, you don't complain about that. When the way to know that I'm arrogant enough to change the world is when something pisses you off about the world, and instead of complaining, find a solution for it. Yeah. But also you have to know what you're good at, who you are. I think the Buddhists call it a temperament. They say everyone has a core temperament that even when you get enlightened and become a Buddha, it most times doesn't eradicate your temperament. Some people are just slow. Yeah, it's slow. Some people are just greedy. You could be a Buddha who still wants to acquire more. Some people are just, the Catholics call them the 7 deadly sins. Those core characters of a human being that are almost impossible to change. Yeah, again, I think the psychologists call them personality traits. Again, these are core character. This is a core part of you that is almost impossible to change. Yeah. So a big part is knowing that. Personally, I think it's who you are, because most of those are very simplistic versions. Because even in Buddhism, they say you have a mixture of most, but then you one thing. Also, personalities, you have a mixture of most, but then things like that.
So it's like being fully aware
Yes,
of yourself.
yes.
Okay.
Mostly work up your awareness. No, okay. When we are playing football and my friends get into a fight, I'm very quick to figure out how to stop the fight, right? When me and my friends, when we're at school, maybe, and me and my friends are looking for money to do something, I'm very quick to figure out how to make money, right? There could be simple things like that. Knowing what part of who you are is actually a deterrent. Knowing your weaknesses. Knowing that, when it comes to when we are given coursework to read, I was too slow at reading. I also have part of who you are is what you're strong at and what you're weak at. Yes, and what you're weak at technically. So as an entrepreneur, that's a big part. Is this is who I am. This is the story I believe in. And these are things that piss me off. This is the arrogance I have to not settle for in the world, right? So when you have those things, then the first step is you start copying, right? So yes, so let's use the body example that I gave, right? So you're driving to work, and you see that a border guy cuts you off, and you get very pissed. You reach at work and even shout at your subordinates. You're like, "You man, why aren't you doing this thing, the simple thing that yeah, because you're pissed off about the border guy." If you're aware enough, you know that I'm arrogant enough not to set off a world like this, and I'm complaining instead of doing something about it, right? So an entrepreneur instead here would say, what can I do to make sure that border guy never cuts me off, right? The first step is to copy. What are other people doing? What are they doing in Rwanda, for example? What are they, things like that. And your entrepreneurship could be, by the way, political policy, right? It could be that, okay, now I can write a clear policy and submit it to URA, or I can contest for mayor and make this policy work, right? Politics is a bit tricky that you probably may not get it to work. But again, if you're arrogant enough,
it's a long shot.
yes, it's hard. It's just hard for most of us. But if you're arrogant enough, it's not impossible. You understand, right? It's also one entrepreneurial journey. Is I have this problem and I can solve it this way, right? It's also one entrepreneurial journey. And when you start copying, because most people you don't end up repeating work that most people have done, right? So the first step is see what other people are doing to solve a similar problem, but then bring your own personality to it. Because again, when I started, I mentioned that entrepreneurship is art. Bring your own understanding of life, because knowing who you are basically is knowing the way the universe expresses itself to you. It's knowing what makes you cry, knowing what makes you laugh, knowing what makes you dance, things like that. That is mostly not within your body or whatever. Knowing who you are is basically knowing how you understand the universe, right? And so you bring this knowledge onto the same problem, yes, but you've also learned a little bit about where other people have started, so you're not
starting from a clean canvas. So the canvas is there, and you're bringing your touch to it.
Yes. Okay. Everyone stands on the shoulders of others, right? Even the greatest, I think Newton is the one who said that whatever, my success is because of the shoulders of giants who came before me. But this is a story of everyone. You start to talk because your parents talk to you, right? That is how you learn to talk. If you grow up among chimps, you're going to sprawl like chimps. The language you'll have is for the chimps. We take you to school, and those teachers, because they learned how to teach and they give their lives to teach others how to teach. That is how you learn how to write. And so on and so forth. Everything else, you'd learn how to drive the same way. If you're a manager, you probably learn from someone what it means to manage and things like that. Yes. And for me, that is what I call copying. basically the technical term would be learning. Yes, the technical term would be learning. But again, because of our education system, that has also been construed into some sort of institution, right? What I don't mean is go to university and say learn how to write policy or something like that. Start copying, see maybe who is your, like if you want to solve the, okay, let's get a more businessy thing. Let's talk about Uvotam here, right? So now we've figured out what we want to do, right? We're arrogant enough to believe that we can do this. Where do we start, right? So we start copying, right? So the way we start is go to YouTube and watch those videos of people editing videos. Yeah, go to YouTube, maybe do a film program and see from filmmakers how a movie is made from beginning to end. Yes, this in essence is copying.
It's copying.
Yeah, is copying. And you start to copy, you start to apply your, because whenever you're watching a video, you're going to disagree with something.
Yes.
Right? You're going to say, this is, that usually is your personality speaking
coming
out.
out.
Your own self saying, me, the way the universe expresses itself to me is different from the way it's expressing itself to this person, even if that person at that point is who you're copying from.
Yes.
So then you choose and pick, this is what I'm choosing to copy from this person.
I'm dropping this one and I'm putting this one.
Yes.
Okay.
So that is a very good, a good starting point is, okay, now you copy, you've built your whatever you're doing into an institution that is, similar at least to the work that other people have done. So for example, if you want to start a border business, you're at a place where you have maybe one or two borders, right? What everyone else is doing. But what those people don't have is your personality, your arrogance, and your story, right? So yeah, each of them has their own story, their own level of arrogance, and their own personality, right? So now you have your three things, and you're at the same level as them. Yeah. At Uvotam here, we have a shop, we have our wedding business, we have our podcasting business, we have the basic things you'd find
The
basically.
studio, the
the studio,
equipment.
the equipment, all that stuff. We copied. None of us here can make cameras. Yeah, we figured that you need a
You have
camera.
this camera, this lens,
exactly.
this,
Yes,
yeah.
and also we've copied the skills. So we know how to take pictures, we know how to record videos, we know how to expose, things like that. So we've copied. Yeah. So you're at that stage as an entrepreneur. That's the good place to start, right? Every business starts like that. But the business that survive, know that this is just the beginning. The business that fail, if you start like a mobile money shop without these other three things, then when Stanbic closes, you're going to close. Or when Stanbic uses AI to do agent banking, you're going to close your business. And this is the fate of most Ugandan businesses, right? 90% of Ugandan businesses close within the first year, right? 90% of them close within the first year. And most of those businesses, it's because that story is not there. Yeah. So there are two things that run a business. Yeah. A business like a person, a person needs food to stay alive, right? But also he needs the story to yes, exactly, to have a reason to stay alive, right? So you have to stay alive, but you don't just the means to stay alive like the food, you also need a reason to stay alive, right? This is what Jesus is trying to say when he says man shall not live on bread alone, but also the word of God. What he means is you don't live on food alone, but also you need a story to drive your purpose, right? He calls it the word of God, but it's you could, if you're not like religious, that's another way to interpret it, right? And a business also needs those two things. Yeah. In the capitalistic world we are living today, a business needs an income. You need your balance sheet to be positive. You need to make more than you spend, which is the food, in order to that's a means to operate here, to make sure you can hire people to do the work, you make sure you can buy the equipment that you need to do the work, you make sure you have the electricity that you need to do the work, and so on and so forth. But then after the income, you also need the story, right? You need the word of God, the purpose, and so on.
The purpose, or like the vision and the mission of the company have defined to dot.
A clear vision of, it doesn't have to be clear, to be honest, but you need a vision, you need a sense of this is what I'm out to achieve. Yeah. And every time I wake up in a world that this doesn't exist, yes, it means I have work to do, right? Yes, because again, this is the only expression of your arrogance, the only expression of your faith is through effort. There is no other way. Yes, you have to show up and put in the work. Yeah, and effort could be creativity. It could be, learn a new trick, something that people haven't tried. It could be innovative, come up with another way of doing the same thing that people have been doing that's much, maybe much more efficient or much easier. It could be whatever it is, but it has to be effort. That is the way to come from. I think there's a book by Peter Thiel called 0 to 1. That is the way to come from 0 to 1. You have to have the faith and the effort. So to start, you've copied. You've also figured out that besides just the vision, you need the food. Your business needs the food, which is source of income, money in, money out. So, if you're starting, for example, let's start with, again, the banking thing. You're starting your agent banking thing. You have your story that we don't know. You have your personality that no one else knows or has. And you have the arrogance, right? So you've copied everyone else within Tinder. You've set up your mobile money and agent banking. Yes, but say your problem, the thing that pisses you off is that what could be okay? So the typical thing that pisses you off is maybe you don't have your, let's say, for example, a big problem in Uganda is generational wealth, right? A big problem in Uganda is generational wealth. So you think that you don't want your children to start from scratch to generate wealth, because that's a big problem that pisses you off. You feel like they should, in terms of money, they should stand on your shoulders. Yeah, this is a story that is animating you. It's a story that moves you, right? So you have your story, which is, I want to make sure that my kids have generational wealth. I have, in my research, or from my skill set, I am very good at retail business. I can service customers who want mobile money quickly. I can also manage few people, so and so. I can make sure that if I had maybe 3 people to work in my entrepreneurship, in my proprietorship agent banking thing, they are able to those 2 people are able to work efficiently. I have the skill set to manage those. I'm a good temper person. People, when they work around me, they're comfortable. I'm a fair person. I'll be paying them fair. Things like that. You know who you are as a person. You also know I'm not very good at math. I'm probably not going to invent a new banking system, right? You know your weaknesses. You know your strengths. And you say, okay, from what I've seen, let me go into agent banking. So you start your agent banking business the same way any other agent banking business in Tinder looks like, but you have those 3 things that no one has, or everyone has a different version of. Yes, yes, yes. So now for you, your approach is, okay, now that the business is making money, business is almost fully automatic. We can predict how many clients we're going to get in a month. We can predict how much we are going to make, and so on and so forth. So now, what is the next step in making my story a reality, right? So now you can experiment with, again, an entrepreneur, part of the arrogance is being able to do the risky stuff, right? So you can now experiment with, maybe let me start a family savings thing, right? So, like today we have circles. You could say, instead of starting a circle, let me start something similar to a circle that is targeting families. I want to encourage families to, yes, and you can start with your own. Yes, you say, you know what? So let's start maybe our own collection of like a reserve amount for if any of us get sick, right? So you say, okay, just put in whatever you can afford to put in, right? The money is not to be taken out. It is for an emergency, right? So when you achieve that, you can figure out, again, because you're running this as a business, you can figure out how can I make money off this. If you achieve this and it works well for your family, that is the experiment. Then you can offer it as a service. When people come to send and pull money, you can give them a flyer and tell them, hey, by the way, we have this very good insurance scheme for families, and you start selling that, right? And if that works, you can move on to something else. You can tell people that, you can go to your family and say, okay, now at least we have the emergencies covered. What about thriving? Why don't we have, again, the same structure, but for education, to make sure that our cousins, maybe who can't afford to take their children to school, they have a family fund to start from, things like that. Yeah, everyone to their own, things like that. Whatever you can contribute is fine, but when we are giving out, we give to the one who needs the most, something like that.
Maybe also looks like scaling in business.
Yes. And I didn't want to get into those mostly Western terms of like
Okay.
scaling and so on and so forth, because this will come naturally to you as an entrepreneur. A lot of these are taught in business school and so on and so forth, but this is, most people, when they worry about scaling, they can forget that the whole point of you doing the business is executing your story, right? It is not about copying what other people wrote in their books and so on and so forth. And if at some level, because again, part of executing your story is copying, if at some level of that execution, you have to copy scaling, then you copy scaling. Yes, that will come. Yes, that will come naturally. But at any one point as an entrepreneur, you have to know your business as this is the story I'm executing. This is the story I'm executing.
So you have an individual template, and all these things like scaling, if they fall into your template at point X, then you go with them.
Yeah, most of the copying would even mean hiring someone who knows how to scale businesses like yours. It would mean maybe taking a class about franchising, things like that. That is, it could be whatever it is. You have to know at some point that, okay, this is my next step, because at your point in the story, this is where you have to go. Yes, yes. And this is, again, the entrepreneurial journey. Not everyone is going to be an entrepreneur. Most people are going to go and chase the path that has been pre-written. You go to university, get your first class with honors, get hired at Stanbic, work your way to being the manager of your branch, work your way to being manager of the country, work your way to being CEO of Stanbic. That is a good path. That is a good path for them. But some people, again, because of their skill set, most of those people, they know that I can do the banking language. I understand the banking language well. Like, I have the skill set to run a bank and so on and so forth. Why would I start what? Selling shoes, things like that. Yes, because that person also knows who they are. That is the path that they will follow. But most people, first of all, finding who you are is also a process on its own. They have to find who they are, but also there's no pre-written path. When they find who they are eventually, there is no pre-written path. Yeah, most of those people are going to end up becoming entrepreneurs because the entrepreneur creates their own path. You understand? Yes. So, okay. Now you've started copying, you're faithful to your story because, again, you believe in it strongly. You're faithful to it. You're letting it guide you, tell you what to do next, and so on and so forth. Now you've started. That is basically how you start a business. Yes.
Okay, so that's very good. So then how do you get people to notice your business?
Yes. So this is the point of this podcast, by the way, this episode, because this podcast generally is about advertising. And so this whole part was introducing so you know your business. But the most important part is, after you know your business, is you want to get people to get involved with your business. Yes. The most important part is authenticity, right? And if the whole point of what we've been saying is, if you know enough of those three things about yourself, you're arrogant enough, you know why you're doing what you're doing, and you know what you're good at. So now the authenticity is making sure people know this too, right? So now you're at the level of sharing your story. Yes, that is why we're doing this podcast, is to share the story of Uvotam, to let people know why we did what we are doing, and why we think it's important to the world, right? And again, a big part of this storytelling is exaggeration. If you went on Netflix and found a movie of a typical person, say like me, who wakes up every day, they drive to Nadia, they sit on their computer for 8 hours, then they go and eat food and go and sleep, that would be the most boring movie in the world, right? So within that movie, if I'm going to write a movie about myself, I'm going to exaggerate. The one time, like out of the 100 times I've driven to Nadia, the one time the border guy crossed me, is I'm going to make it a major factor so people can be angry with me. The small things that happen that have impact is the movie is exaggerated for dramatic effect, and that is just the nature of storytelling. When you're sharing your story with the world, you have to exaggerate for dramatic effects. It's called fake it until you make it. Yes. But what differentiates something that you see and say this is stupidly exaggerated, it's not real, to a story you believe? Because both of them, believe me, are exaggerated. What is the difference between those two is the author of the story that is believable believed in in the story they were telling. You understand? So the fake it till you make it person who's actually authentic, even if everyone is faking it in the universe, but the guy who fakes it and they look authentic even in their faking it, the Obamas, the very eloquent faking guys who use like, oh my God, I want to be that guy. Those guys actually believed that this is who I genuinely this is what I want to be. This is what I want the world to know me as. This is what I want the world to remember me as. Because again, the Buddhists say there is no self, so there is no actual you. You can never find who you are, but you can create a story of what you want to be. Yes, and a story that you believe in, the story you want to share about who I am, fine, it's going to be exaggerated. It cannot be accurate because you even don't know who you are, because you're not, according to the Buddhists, you're not even anyone. But you have to believe, and that is the story that you want your business to be like. You want to express your business as a story that is still believable. That is still believable. The guy who makes Nikes wrote the book Shoe Dog, right? And in this Shoe Dog, it talks about how he went to Japan and how he started, the whole issue thing with his coach, and then it became the billion-dollar business that we know now, right? And he's the way now he's working with top athletes to like Jordan and so on, to like endorse his product, is authentic, because this guy was an athlete who accepted that my skill is not to what to run. I don't have what it takes to compete with actual good athletes, but I have these other skills. I can actually sell products, right? And then he made a shoe company that is bigger than any one athlete in the world, right? So that guy of Shoe Dog, the story is exaggerated. If you read Shoe Dog, it's a marketing piece, but it is so believable. It is so believable. If you're an entrepreneur and you read a Shoe Dog, in your heart you say, oh, I'm not alone. That people have been where I am, right? It is so believable. It's so well written as a story, right? So part of part of letting people know who you are is start telling your story, but believe what you're saying. Believe the story you're telling out there, and it's through ads. Obviously, you're going to start putting out content on social media about what you do and who you are. You have to believe it, right? But you have to exaggerate it a bit so it gets people's attention, right? What we are doing with this podcast is, the most important part is to encourage you to do podcasts with us, for example. Yeah, we think that is the most efficient way of telling your story. So you come to Uvotam, we help you with the technical stuff, and then you come with your team and you tell the world, oh, this is why we started our pharmacy. This is why we started our hospital. This is why you should come to our hospital. This is why you should eat from our hotel. This is why you should use our SMS bundles, and so on and so forth. And, you believe that this is actually important, right? If you believe that, the authenticity is going to drop off. People are going to actually agree that, yes, this is
What you're saying,
yes,
it is.
what you're saying is real. The story is believable, despite being exaggerated. Yes.
When is that time? Okay, I'm thinking sometimes maybe entrepreneurs can be in a space where they have some level of doubt. How do you tell them to work around that? Like you have something you believe in, but there's this level of doubt within you. So do you go with the belief until everyone believes what you're believing? Have you? Okay, what I'm saying, like you can believe something to a point where it's actually what you're believing in, but you have like some inner doubt there.
Doubt, the Christians call doubt the lack of faith. Yeah, which is okay, which is true. Yeah. The thing about doubt is the universe giving you feedback that you're lying somewhere, that you're not being true to your story somewhere. Yeah. So doubt is supposed to be listened to, right? It's not, you tell your story, but as you execute, because you only express your faith or your arrogance through execution. As you execute, when doubt triggers in, it is the universe telling you, hey, maybe you're lying about how good you were at coding. Maybe you're lying about how good you were, what family resolutions. Maybe you're lying about, you know, basically it's the universe
It's like
telling you that,
generated feedback.
yes,
The
it's
universe.
giving you feedback to tell you that there's something that you're not being honest to yourself about,
So
right?
is that a point where you have to go back and
Yes,
revisit your
yes.
story?
Yes, so that is when you have to analyze. Usually it's not visiting the story you actually believe in, because usually that story, the faith is, you believe that the story is there, the whole point of the faith, but the expression of your faith is now what you have to revise. What else do I have to do? Because sometimes, so for example, let's start with a small business. Like, oh no, what you're doing, you're very good at chicken farming, right? Yes. So you have your chicken farm, you have your good clients. Today you get your good stock, and then you're surprised that they get a disease, for example, yeah, and it kills like half the stock. And then you doubt, you're like, hey, am I actually a good farmer? But this is feedback you're getting from the universe that is telling, it's not telling you to doubt your story as a person. Maybe if your story is set to feed the world and so on, whatever it is, I'm not sure what your story is, but whatever your story is, the doubt is not to make you question your story. The doubt is to question your expression of your faith. Basically to tell you, are you sure you shouldn't be taking extra care of vaccinating the birds? Are you sure there is not another skill you need to execute your faith properly, to execute your arrogance properly? That is the story. That is what doubt is. Like there are things there's the Buddhists call them hindrances, right? So these are emotional expressions of, there's anger, there's doubt. I think sloth is one of them as well. Um, Basically, if you're practicing meditator, I am a practicing meditator. If you're practicing meditator, these are things that come up in your meditation. But this is feedback from within your meditation to tell you that, okay, if you're angry, maybe there is a thing that you haven't resolved. There's a thing that you haven't resolved, and you need to put in the effort to look into it and see why that is making you angry, and see, what amount of effort do you need to actually resolve that. If you're tired, you're not taking care of yourself, maybe things like that. So this is what you do when you're meditating, but this is what we all do when we are living. One life is a whole meditation. It's just that it's not a meditation you're in control of if you're not paying attention, right? When you sit on a cushion, it's you meditating, you're in control of your meditation. But when you're living, which is the same thing, because you're going to fear, you're going to doubt, you're going to not know. There's ignorance as well, where I don't know what the fuck to do now. There are no people to copy from anymore. You don't know what to do. That is also part of like executing your story. And that is the world or the universe or whatever you believe in, or God telling you that, okay, you need to take a pause and you need to reflect a little bit more because there's a blocker here. And that is mostly what expresses as doubt when you're like doing a business or something like that. Yes. But again, part of faith is noting the doubt, right? When Jesus says it's the mountains thing, a man who believes will move the mountains. Yes, Jesus is saying that you have to actually have the effort and the skill to move the mountain. It's not saying that you're going to do some magic thing. Yes.
Like move and I move. All right. Okay. Thank you so much for that. So when you talk about authenticity, yeah, is it that all that you need to get noticed when you're creating a business? Is it the whole entire thing that you just need, or the things around authenticity, apart from authenticity?
No. Actually, the thing about authenticity usually is if people pay attention to your story, authenticity will retain them. If you get your first client, if you have a recurring business and you get your first client and they interact with you, it is your authenticity that is going to retain them. They're going to see the quality that you produce. That's usually an expression of your authenticity, and they're going to stay. They're going to be less frustrated, or like whatever, no one is perfect, but they'll weigh between their frustrations and their satisfaction and choose that the satisfaction is much greater, and they'll stay. But as a starting entrepreneur, especially, or as a big company that's maybe competing for a new niche, or as a company that has been threatened by like a new competitor and so on and so forth, what you actually need to break through is to learn the structure of storytelling, right? And this is a big part of what we do at Uvotam as well. And we think podcasting is a good way for your business as well to tell your story well, but you have to know the structure of storytelling, right? So there's a book by Joseph Campbell called The Hero's Journey, right? That sort of tries to analyze most of the stories that are being told, from mythology to anywhere in the world, even in Africa before like the white man came, how we told our stories and so on. And the book sort of describes what the hero's journey is, what the structure of a compelling, well-written story is, and how that is universal. That is sort of a psychological thing in our head, is when I watch a good story, I don't need anyone to tell me that this is a good story. I know that it is a good story. A big part of why Hollywood is a billion-dollar industry is because a lot of the people who go to work in Hollywood have been trained and have practiced in the skill of telling story through a certain structure. When you see these, so there's a bit of things that are changing. Maybe when you see like TikTok, for example, part of just storytelling, they're also adding a little bit of computing computation to the storytelling. So they make the stories more addictive. That's why you end up scrolling multiple stories. But even if you watch a TikTok, a good TikTok, it falls within the structure of storytelling. And you as an entrepreneur, if you want to break through, that is usually the first step. You have your business now working properly. You know where you want to go. You have a clear compass. You're authentic. When the customers come, they love what they are seeing at your business. The next step is tell stories that will captivate people, right? So how do you repackage your story into a structure that can be pop? How do you get the message Kendrick Lamar is saying and repackage it into a Drake song, right? How do you make something deep? This is, again, hip hop is actually a good thought. This is what Jay-Z does. So Jay-Z can make an album that's so vulnerable. He made an album called 404 where he's talking about like his infidelity, where he's talking about, struggles with parenting and things like that. But it doesn't make you pity him. It makes you inspired, right? Because he has packaged it into a structure that is supposed to inspire you, despite being extremely
Extremely
vulnerable.
vulnerable.
Yes. So this is the thing is, in the end, we all have problems, and we all enjoy sharing our problems and also listening to people who are in the same place as us. It makes us feel less alone. Society is built on stories, but there are structures of stories that are more consumable than others. And that is, as an entrepreneur, that's where you have to start, right? You have to, for example, if you're starting a podcast, if you're in the funeral business and you're starting a podcast, don't make the podcast about sorrow. So, it's scary for people. Yes, you can make it about the cool way to send off people. You make, like, you say, okay, like, if you've lived your life, you deserve to go in a fancy coffee, whatever it is. You can make even the darkest parts of life fascinating, because we all know, everyone knows deep down their heart that death is inevitable, but we don't want to think about it because the story of death has been told in the most scary way possible. You understand?
Actually, I was following a TikTok for hospice nurses, and for some reason I was addicted to an account because of how they were talking about the end life. These are people who usually sit with people who are dying, and she was talking about the whole process and how people get to their end breath, but it was not like in a scary way, and that was the purpose of her account. Yeah, so like, feel comfortable around death, like look at it like a natural thing that happens to everyone. Yeah, I think that's what you're trying to.
Yes, exactly, because they figured out what is the right way to tell this gloomy story, what is the right way to tell it, right? And that is, you as a business, as long as you know your authenticity. Now it's time to, because storytelling is an art, it's a craft. It's time to figure out what is the right way to craft my story so I can get people's attention. That's how you see the Apple ad. There's an Apple ad of 1984 where Apple was claiming to come and destroy IBM, because IBM was the man, the industry, and Apple was the innovative new guy who they're stamping down, and so on and so forth. Today, Apple is the IBM, is the yeah. So, but the thing is, at that point, it was part of the authenticity, and they know the structure of storytelling. They've read enough Jojo Reel to know that if you tell a story like this, everyone will read it, right? And this is the way you have to do. You have to come into doing advertising, come and partner with us, because this is what we do. You can, come start a podcast with us, or come and brainstorm a deep advertising concept with us. Come and execute your ads with us, for example. But yes, the only way to break through is to tell that story. And you don't have to be a starting business. You can be an established business, but you're looking at your reports and you're seeing the numbers going down. One of the episodes we talked about MTN and how they had the opportunity, all the opportunity in the world, to be, again, a duopoly, MTN and Airtel, to be a duopoly in fiber internet. Yeah, but because everyone hates their customer care, they've let other smaller companies come in. Because if I'm buying fiber, I want guys I'm going to be able to call and they actually pick, because they don't have like 1 billion clients and they don't know how to handle that. And how they could have done that well, right? And yeah, so for even for big companies like that, you get times when you struggle and you need to figure out a structure. First of all, you need to be authentic to know that, okay, this, I actually want to serve people with internet, which most of them do. But now, what is the right story structure to tell my story in a way that actually people believe me? What are some of those structures? Do I need to make a rap album? Things like that. And I was telling you about, let me tell you one other story that today when we are recording this, Mamdani's kid, Mamdani is the lecturer at university, is contesting for mayor of New York, right? So I'm talking about this because they're Ugandan, right? Now, Mamdani's kids' approach is very pop. The campaign is a TikTok campaign through and through. It has dances, he's talking multiple languages, he's interviewing guys, he's doing those street interview things like on TikTok, why are you selling your burgers so expensively? And, like getting feedback like that. And the campaign is a TikTok campaign. And a person, I didn't know he's even Ugandan, but I didn't know him. I've actually met him once, but I didn't know that this guy existed, but now I'm following his campaign. I'm extremely interested. He knows the story because again his platform is more socialist. So the story is socialism. Yeah, that is the story he believes in. But now the packaging. Yeah, the packaging.
Has made it so relatable.
The TikTok, he knows what story is consumable today. And if you listen to him, if you actually believe in socialism, you're going to vote for him. And if you're not sure, his story is so well crafted that you're most likely going to vote for him. At least, even if you're not going to vote for him, you now know about him because the story has come to you. The story has found its way to you. And this is important. You can, whatever story you're telling, because Trump, who is like the opposite, telling the opposite story from Mamdani, can also use TikTok to tell his story, right? He can use the same structures. The structures are almost all the same, but you need to be aware of those structures. Yeah, or you need to partner with firms like Uvotam. This is what we do. We've studied this, and we can tell you how to structure your business into a packageable story that you can push as a campaign, and so on and so forth. And we think podcasting is a big part of that, by the way. That's why we started this podcast. But it could not be. It could be TikTok videos. It could be short films. It could be a music album, whatever it is. Come and talk to us, and we'll help you build your brand together.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ken. Okay, thank you guys for sticking around for this episode. You can also watch our last 2 episodes that are on our YouTube. You can follow us on our channels. That's YouTube, Apple Podcast, TikTok.